unless you can figure out the
Try
PowerPoint.
one more time.
But just start recording and then see if you can figure out the PowerPoint. Okay?
Yeah, it's recording.
Oh. Nice. Okay, so last week, Jan did her testimony night. The week before that, though, I taught a lesson from the book of Numbers, because we're working our way through the Bible. So we've gone through Genesis, Exodus, we're in Numbers, and tonight we are in Numbers 13 is the lesson I'm teaching. Now on social media, I posted Numbers 14, but I accidentally typed the wrong chapter. The title of the lesson is still the same, though. What do you fear? Some context, because I always try and provide a little bit of context for you guys. The Israelites are still wandering in the desert. We haven't really moved forward much from the last time I taught. And so these are the same Israelites that had been freed from Egyptian slavery. It's the same generation of people. And so now they're traveling their way through the wilderness towards the promised land. And so what happens is God... or Moses sends spies into the promised land. They get close to the promised land, and Moses sends spies into it to scout out what the promised land looks like before all of the Israelites go in. And then the spies come back to give the news of what the promised land looks like. And so, think of the travel that the Israelites have had to go through at this point. I mean, they were freed from slavery, they were hunted by the Egyptians, then they wandered in the desert, and they were starving, and then they were dying of thirst, and God was providing, and they were following this cloud. And so now finally, they're on the brink of going into the promised land, and they're just waiting for these spies to come back. And the spies come back, and that's where we're going to be with our lesson. But before that, as always, I'm going to pray. Follow my lead during the prayer. Father, I pray that you speak through this lesson, Lord. I pray, Father, that you would teach everybody in this room, leaders included, everybody, Father, what you would have for us, Father. Again, I thank you for this small, intimate group, Father. I pray that because of the few numbers, the small groups would be rich and the lesson would hit harder, Father. I pray, Father, that you would be glorified through this. And we just want to lay down this lesson in the small groups as opportunity for your Spirit to move, Father. So please be here. And now, quietly to yourselves, pray that God would speak through me. And then quietly to yourselves, pray that God would speak to you. Amen. So, when we had our what was it called? The indoor camping. In the morning, I led a Bible study. And everybody was sleeping through it because everybody stayed up all night. But the Bible study, I decided to start just in the first chapter of Romans and see how far we got. Now, I got through the first verse before everybody was asleep. But we did reach, actually, I kept talking anyway, in case someone was awake. And I got to verse 16. Now, I feel like a lot of people know Romans 1:16. For I am unashamed of the gospel. Go ahead and throw it up there, David. For I am unashamed. Oh, next one. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. And we know this because of the whole 116 crew that puts this verse out here. And I'm going to open up by repeating kind of what I said in the Bible study. I know this verse. It was one of the first verses that I really actually memorized in high school because of the whole rap group. And I embraced this whole not ashamed. I would chant the whole not ashamed, and that became a part of me. But the thing is that it became a part of me in kind of like the rapper attitude sort of way, like defiant, rebellious, which isn't necessarily bad because it's a spiritually good thing to not be ashamed of the gospel. But the thing is that I didn't understand it fully. And I don't think a lot of us really understand it fully of not being ashamed. Because like I've brought up the coffee company that I work with, because these employees who are around me, honestly, they are a different level of unsaved than I've ever experienced before. It's become a thing where they're so unsaved that I feel like to present the gospel is just going to annoy them. Like, it doesn't feel like I can say anything to get them out of this mindset, to get them, I feel like I'm just being another annoying Christian or something like that. Like, the ideologies that they have, their worldviews, and just everything that they say. And another difficult part of it is that they're all together on it. So, like, I could say something, and it could get to an individual person, but you just know that they're going to end up talking to everybody else, and they have that backing, and it's really difficult. And it's gotten to the point where I feel ashamed of the gospel. I still do my best. I still strive to share the gospel with them and to have these conversations, but I know inside that I am ashamed. And the reason why is because I think a lot of times with the whole I am not ashamed of the gospel, with the whole 116 crew, at least for me, that's the part that I emphasized. But the because is what's important. Because it is the power of God. And this is the part that I think we don't fully understand, is that the gospel is the power of God. I mean, think of it. I mean, it's through God's power that the universe came into existence. It's through God's power that miracles were performed. People were raised from the dead. And it says it is the power of God. The gospel is the power of God for the salvation of man. And so what it comes down to with me is I know I don't have the faith in God's power to save these people. I don't believe, intellectually, obviously I believe, but in my soul I don't believe that the gospel is the power of God. I believe that these people's ideologies are more powerful than the power of God. I believe that their ideologies are more powerful than the gospel. And that is why then I am ashamed. Because I feel like to try and speak the gospel to these people is powerless. I don't feel the power of it. And I feel like that's kind of a fair assumption for a lot of people. Christianity is kind of a little bit laughed at. And that's where the whole defiant attitude comes in. But it's not really supposed to be about this defiant attitude. It's about being reliant on the power of God. It's about knowing that the gospel has power. So ask yourself, do you believe that the gospel actually has power to save people? Think of your schools and the people who are stuck in debauchery, the people who are doing what they want, living how they want. Why don't you share the gospel with them? Because you're afraid that they're going to laugh you off. Why are you afraid that they're going to laugh you off? Because you think that the gospel doesn't have any power. You think that it's just going to annoy them. And the thing is that in Numbers, we kind of see a fairly similar situation. David, go ahead and go next slide. So the spies come back. And it says, when they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it clearly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large, and moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. And so the spies go into the land, and they come back, and they say, there's no way we can go in there. Their cities are too fortified. Their men are too great. They're like giants in there. And Caleb is sitting here saying, no, with God, we can do it. And here's what's crazy about it. All the spies say the land is exactly as God said it. It is flowing with milk and honey. Look at the size of this fruit that we got brought back. I mean, this is crazy. And so they see this land that God promised them is exactly what he promised it would be, which is a miracle in itself. And they still don't have the faith to rely on God to have the power to overcome these people. And because of that, you'll see in chapter 14, hopefully you did see when you read it this week, you see that God punishes them. And they have to wander in the desert for 40 years because they did not believe that God had the power to overcome the giants of the world. And so this is where the connection is. The Israelites put their faith in their circumstances instead of trusting God. We, when we're afraid to share the gospel, put our faith in the circumstances, not the power of God. We see the people and our circumstances. We know what's going on kind of in their life. We know what kind of religion they have. They know what kind of interactions they had with different Christians or what they think about Christians. And so for us to go and present the gospel to them, it's like, oh no, there's no way. You guys, Romans 1:16 said that the gospel is the power of God. And we know that we should share the gospel with people. We should be able to see people enter into relationship with God. And we don't because we put our faith in the circumstances. Just like the spies. And so if you were the spies, if you were one of the Israelites, whose side would you take? Caleb's, who says, let's go into the land, even though they're giants and they're fortified cities and they way outnumber us, let's go in. Or would you be like the other spies who say, there's no way we can do it? I mean, let's be real. The spies were actually being pretty reasonable in what they said. They're giants. They have fortified cities. They have all this stuff working for them. And so reason would say, don't go for it. But it's about, what do you fear? And there comes the title. Do you fear man more? Do you put your faith in your circumstance more? Or do you fear God more? Do you put your faith in God more? Do you trust that he has the power, that the gospel does have the power to save people? And one more thing. I used myself, a very current situation of mine. I am teaching from a place where I say I would probably be in the spy camp. And I don't want that. I don't want it to be like that. I want to be able to say that I would be in the Caleb camp, to trust God, because the spy camp got punished. They wandered in the desert for 40 years. And when we rely on our own common sense instead of trusting the power of God, we're not going to wander in the desert for 40 years. But I think a lot of times we make decisions for ourselves instead of for God's. And then 2 months down the road, we go, God, where are you? I feel like the situations, the whole wandering in the desert for 40 years kind of happens in our own lives when we make these decisions to not do what God tells us to do.